All right, we're going to start talking about explicit intents. So this is where we have one activity and we're going to start another activity, and we're going to have this first main activity call a second activity or a third activity in return. We call them explicit intents because they're very explicit to tell the Android system run this particular class, not just we need some app to get a photo here. There's some examples of explicit intents from Android developer here. So we've actually looked through this section a little bit in the other example. This is here the intents and intent filter example, and here we're just talking about examples of explicit intents. So again, we create an intent here. And give it some name to have a variable that holds intent. But we actually specify explicitly the class we want. And this is a class we generally define that defines another activity. So we say that class name dot class to say run that activity. So this has to be an activity registered in our option. We can then pass some data to it, and we'll look at some different ways of doing that. And then we say start. This is saying start service. We'll generally say start intent. And then we'll specify the intent here. So we'll look at a different example of this here. And again, now they go then they go on to implicit intents, which we've already talked about in the previous video. There's also a tutorial from Vogela here that is kind of dated, but does go through some of this stuff with intents and give some examples of starting intents, creating intents, and saying start activity with that intent. And then with an explicit intent, creating that activity to intent, and then sending some values here. This is similar to what we'll be doing here, and then starting that other activity up here for that. Some of this is a little dated. The transfer data back from the activities has actually been updated recently in Android, and so we'll be looking at a slightly different system than that, where it's similar, but where this start activity for result has to be placed inside a special callback. Not just like this, and there's no request code for it anymore. So slightly different, but the basics are still there. We're going to look at this example multiple activities here. So this actually is a link to a full activity, but I'm just going to look at the three different Java classes here. And I'm going to actually bring these up in Android Studio here. So there's this main activity that we have for us to use, and we can actually look at the layout if we want for that. So here's the basic layout for this. We just have we have a label here, first activity, so we know we're in the main activity. We have a field where they can enter a name and a number, like for example their age, and we can start the second activity. We're just going to pass this information to the second activity here. There's also a button to pass to the third activity. Again, this will pass the same information to the third activity, but the third activity will process that and send back a message back. So we'll return some message here. So that's it. So again, with every activity, we have a Java class and a layout file here. Now, when you create new activities, you can't just go up here and say new Java class. This will not work generally, because besides you need this and you need the layout, but there's also a special file we don't talk about much, is this manifest file. This has a lot of settings like permissions and stuff for your activity, for your class. It also has a list of each of the activities. So here's an activity, third activity here. So you need to put these in there. Again, you can do it manually, but the easiest way to create a new activity is to right click here. Rather than saying new Java class, go down there, say new activity, and do like a new empty activity. And that'll create the layout file for you, the Java file, and then put the correct entry in the manifest file also. So that's what you should do. So do file, new activity, empty activity for you to do. Okay, so I'm just running this activity real quick. That it brings up the first activity. I can again enter some names and stuff. I just met with Julio, one of our recruiters, so I'm just using his name here. And so I can hit start activity. This will run a different screen. The second activity screen, it'll again pass the information from that first screen back here to here that I can display, and then I can hit go back to go back to this first screen here. Now when we run the third activity, we'll go to that again, go to a third activity screen, display it, but then we can also have some information that we can type in some message that we can send back. And it's just, I mean, maybe we'll do some calculation or something like that, and we want to return that to the main activity. We can have a button here to return to the main activity, and again, we're passing that information back here. So that's what this is, this basic app is doing here on my phone. So the main activity, let's look at that. So we're getting the two edit text fields for the name and the number, and then the text view for the results that we're displaying. We're declaring those and finding those, and then we're calling this set up the two buttons for the second activity and the third activity. So the second activity here, again, we're finding the button view here, and then we're setting a listener for that button. Here's the on click, and here's the code for actually doing the activity here. We're just logging a statement so we can see that this is run. We are then getting the name from the edit text field. We go get text and we convert that to a string, and then we're getting the number. So again, we have to go to the edit text for that number, get the text, convert it to a string. So that's that. Now we have to convert that to a number, so we do a double dot parse and pass that in here and do that. Now, one thing you notice, there's no error checking around here. So if you don't enter a number here or you can't parse that number, this will actually crash the app. So this isn't the best way of doing it. We should have a try catch block around here or something like that. But to keep things simple, I'm just doing it the straightforward way. So maybe I should put a to-do message in here too. Add error checking on parsing the number. Okay. Put in a little technical debt there, so we'll come back to that later. Okay, so now we have our name and the number. Now here we're creating an intent. We give it some name, so I'm just calling it I should have named it a little better. Second activity intent. Here's my variable. I say new intent. I have to give it the context. So you can do this a number of different ways. If I'm in the activity, I could actually say like this dot main activity, I think works. I'm used to, since I have a view here, doing view dot get context, because then if we move this to some other place where we're not in the main activity, it'll still work. But there, somehow you have to send the context to the Android system of this, what activity you're running this app in. Here. And again, if we're doing this up here in the main activity, we would just say this because we're in there. But we're now in a subclass in listener here that we created for this. So we created this kind of second lambda class here. Okay, so that's why we have to do this. And then we have to specify the other activity, and this is the class. So we created the second activity. Here we called it second activity here, so it's just like this main activity, and here's the code for it. So again, this variable has to match here, and we just say dot class. So it says run that, basically run that class is your second activity. And now we're going to store the information into this, and we're going to, once we have that intent, we're going to say that intent name dot put extras. That'll store information in that second activity. And again, to store information, we pass it a key value pair. So the first thing is the key. So this is the name that we're going to you can kind of imagine this is like little bags of information, and we're taking the name variable, putting it into a little bag, wrapping it up, and putting a tag on it. The tag says main name. And again, we create another little bag, wrap it up, put the number in there, wrap it up, and then put a tag on it. This is main number. So when we get it on the other end, we'll have to unwrap those tags we'll say, give me the bag that says main number, and I'll look for a number in there. So again, these just have to be tags. String tags for these, and then the other end has to know those same tags. So often these are stored in another class as like static variables that we can get to, but here I'm just using them as strings. So once we've stored the data that we're sending to that activity, we just say start activity and specify the activity variable here, and that'll start the activity. So let's look at that second activity here. So this is a second activity. It has onCreate. The onCreate is set. This is always done in activities, and in fact, this is created by default here. But now we have to do something. We have a text view that we're going to display on the screen. So we get that find view by ID, so we can access that. Now we're going to get the data from this. So we're going to get our intent, and then we're going to get our extras. This data is passed into what is called extras. So that's because, and again, we had said put extras over here, and now we're saying get extras here. So that'll get our extras in what is called a big bundle of these little key value pairs. So here's our key value pairs. So the first one is going to be the string. We put it in here with this tag, and it was a string. So we say extras dot get string, and we specify the tag. It says go look through all the things in your bundle. There should be a bag that's labeled main name, and inside should be a string. Grab the string out of it and store it here. And similarly, we're saying, go into your whole bundle, find a bag or a thing labeled name main number, go inside of that, and there should be a double inside of that, and store that here. So that gets it. Again, these two tags have to match these tags here. You put it in with a tag, and you pull it out with that same tag here. For that. Okay. Oops. Okay. And then now, okay, I got my screen kind of mixed up. Now it's back. So again, we just read those numbers, and now we had our text field we display on the screen, and we're just going to say text field.set text, and we're going to just say the name and then display that name and number on the screen. Now, right now we're not, we don't have a way to finish this this class. So in order to finish this class, you have to hit the back arrow. Actually, if I go back up here, when I go to the second activity, there's no button here. So if I added a button or something like that, I would call a finish routine here. But now I just have to hit the back arrow to go back to the main activity. That will close out this tag. But again, if I wanted to add a button in here, and we'll do that with the third activity, we would call finish, which is just a method to close this activity up. Okay, so now let's go back. We're going to do similar stuff for the button 3 here. We're going to set up that button and on click for the button. And just like before, we're going to set up our activity here, where we're going to get the name and number. We're going to create the intent, put the extras in the intent, but rather than saying start activity, so that's all of this is just the same here, but here we said start activity. But we can't say start activity. We have to use a special launcher here to launch the activity, because we're going to want information back from it here. So we have to declare this kind of weird listener. We give it some name, and I'm calling it third activity launch result launcher here. And most of this is just kind of set code when you're launching another activity here. And we have to call now. Sometimes you'll be calling different things. Here we're calling another activity, and we're waiting for a result back. So here our contracts are start activity for results, and then we are putting a special listener on activity results. So when our activity gets done, this will be returned to us for us, and results will be the bundle of information we get back from that activity here. So we create this launcher here, and then once we have that, we have to say that name of that launcher dot launch, and then the intent that we created up here. So we create the intent, but the way we launch it, we don't just say start activity. We have to create this special launcher to launch it so we can catch it when it comes back. Okay, so now let's look at our third activity here. Okay, here's our third activity. Similar stuff. Again, we have some text view and an edit text and a button that we're getting. So edit text is the message. We're letting the user type in a message. So if you remember back to our app, when we go to the third activity, so this is we're displaying the information, but this is the edit text for the message we want to send back to the main activity, and here's the return button. So again, this is text field, this is the edit text field, and this is the button. So those are the three things we're declaring here. For that. So we're finding them, linking those all into our XML layout file. And now again, we're getting our extras. We're extracting the name and the number from them using, again, the same tag. So this code here is just like the second activity. This code here is the exact same code as here. But now we want to send some message back. So we have to create. Well, first we need a listener. When we click the button, we're going to send it back. So we have to set our button here. We found our button here, tied it into the XML layout, and now we're adding a listener for on click. And so this is the actual code. So what do we have to do? We actually create another little intent that we send back to the main activity that holds the data that we want. So we create a new intent here. We use intent.put extras to store information. Again, we need a tag and the message. So again, we're going to get our edit text field, get this text out of it, and convert that to a string. So that's our text. So whatever they've typed in here in the message, get that text, convert it to a string, and put it in a bag and label that bag new message. So again, a tag value pair here. And then we're going to set the result to OK. So then the intent knows that everything completed OK. And then we call finish. And again, this is what closes the intent off. Here's this. And if we didn't want to return any information, we could just call finish. We could just get rid of the rest of this. This is all just if we want to return information. If we didn't want to return information, we could just have a button here and say finish here. Okay, so this goes back to our main activity, and it actually this method, this on activity result, is called, and we're given the result. So we check the result has a result code, and it should be result OK because we set it to OK here. That means that the third activity didn't crash or something like that. So we check to make sure the result code is OK. Then we're also given this result, and we can get the data from it, and that'll get our intent that we hid inside of it. Now we're going to extract the data, so we get a bundle of the extras from that, so we get extras, and then once we have that bundle, we can say bundle.getString, and that'll look inside this bundle. There'll be a little bag with a label on it, and we say this is the label, and again, in here we put in a string with this label, and here we're pulling out that string with this label, get string with its label, and that'll be our message, and then we're displaying that message on the screen. Okay, so that's the idea. So this is what we have to do to just pass information to an intent and to the second activity. But if we want information back, we have to do that with a special launcher, and then we have to declare a special callback for that launcher. So when we get the results back here. So that's how we set up and send information to a second or third activity and get information back. Hope you liked it.